Good evening. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host, and this is our 12-minute deep dive into a crisis unfolding across the nation. The death toll from devastating floods that struck this past Friday evening has now risen to 42. The government has pledged support, but as we'll explore tonight, this tragedy exposes deeper systemic vulnerabilities. We'll examine the immediate response, the long-term environmental pressures, and the often invisible communities caught in the middle. Our journey begins with the grim statistics from the Ministry of Special Programs. Police reports indicate Nairobi County has suffered the heaviest loss, with 26 fatalities. The eastern region follows with 10 reported deaths. The Rift Valley region recorded 4 fatalities, while both Nyanza and coast regions reported 1 fatal case each. These numbers, while stark, represent lives lost, families shattered, and communities in mourning. The torrential rains caused widespread destruction, submerging homes, sweeping away vehicles, and collapsing infrastructure. In Nairobi's informal settlements, scenes of devastation were particularly acute. The government's immediate response has been to pledge support. President William Ruto, in a statement released earlier today, expressed his condolences and directed the National Disaster Operations Center, the NDOC, to coordinate all relief efforts. The Ministry of Special Programs has announced an initial allocation of 500 million shillings for emergency aid, including food, temporary shelter, and medical supplies. However, critics are already questioning whether this is a reactive measure to a predictable crisis. To understand the full picture, we must look beyond the immediate rainfall. Kenya's vulnerability to such flooding is not new. It is exacerbated by a confluence of factors, including rapid, unplanned urbanization, inadequate drainage systems in major cities, and the ongoing effects of climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, projects that East Africa will experience more intense and erratic rainfall patterns. This means the events of this past weekend may not be an anomaly, but a preview of a new normal. Let's visualize the regional impact of this disaster. The disparity in fatalities highlights where infrastructure and preparedness failed most critically. Nairobi, as the economic hub with a population exceeding 4 million in the city proper and over 9 million in the metropolitan area, bore the brunt. Its aging drainage system, often clogged with plastic waste, was completely overwhelmed. This brings us to a critical, and often overlooked, element of this story: waste management. On the outskirts of Nairobi lies Dandora, the largest dump site in Kenya and one of the largest in Africa. It spans over 30 acres and receives approximately 2,000 metric tons of waste daily from the city. This site is home to an informal workforce of an estimated 5,000 waste pickers. These individuals, men, women, and sometimes children, spend 12 to 14 hours a day sifting through toxic debris, looking for recyclables like plastic, metal, and glass. They are the invisible backbone of Nairobi's recycling chain, recovering an estimated 20 to 30% of the city's waste. Their work is dangerous, exposed to hazardous materials, sharp objects, and the constant risk of disease. Yet they operate without formal recognition, social security, or protective gear. The connection between Dandora and the floods is direct. A significant portion of the plastic that chokes Nairobi's rivers and drains originates from uncollected waste, some of which is supposed to be processed at sites like Dandora. When heavy rains come, this plastic waste forms blockages, diverting water into homes and streets. A waste picker we spoke to, who asked to be identified only as Mwangi, put it bluntly. He said, and I quote, "When it rains in Nairobi, the city remembers us. The plastic we cannot collect today becomes the flood in your house tomorrow. We are not the problem. We are cleaning the problem, but no one sees us until the water rises." This powerful statement underscores a tragic irony. The very people mitigating the waste crisis are among the most vulnerable to its consequences. Many waste pickers live in informal settlements adjacent to the dump site or along riverbanks, areas that are first and most severely hit by flooding. Their homes, often makeshift structures, offer little protection. So, while the government's 500 million shilling pledge is aimed at affected families broadly, it is unclear what specific mechanisms exist to reach this informal, undocumented workforce. The debate now centers on Kenya's preparedness and long-term strategy. On one side, government officials point to the swift activation of the NDOC and the financial commitment as evidence of a robust response. The Cabinet Secretary for Special Programs emphasized that 120 personnel from the National Youth Service have been deployed to assist in search, rescue, and cleanup operations in the hardest-hit areas. Furthermore, the Kenya Meteorological Department had issued a heavy rainfall advisory 72 hours before the storms hit. The government contends it acted on this information by sending alerts via mobile networks and local administrators. However, opposition leaders and civil society groups argue this is insufficient. They point to a persistent gap between early warning and early action. Receiving an SMS alert is one thing. Having a viable evacuation plan, designated shelters, and cleared drainage channels is another. They argue that the annual cycle of flood-related deaths and displacement points to a failure of urban planning and environmental policy. A key statistic often cited is that less than 15% of Nairobi is served by a formal, functioning stormwater drainage system. The rest relies on natural waterways, which are increasingly encroached upon and polluted. The allocation for drainage and flood control in the last national budget was just under 2.5 billion shillings, a figure critics say is a fraction of the estimated 10 billion shillings needed annually to address the infrastructure deficit. Let's examine this budgetary shortfall. The gap between what is needed and what is allocated is a chasm that translates directly into vulnerability. This is not just a Nairobi problem. In the eastern region, where 10 lives were lost, similar issues of deforestation and riverbank farming have increased flood risks. In the Rift Valley, unregulated development in riparian zones has been cited as a contributing factor. The government's long-term plan, as outlined in its Vision 2030 blueprint, includes major infrastructure projects like the Nairobi Rivers Regeneration Program and the construction of larger dams for water storage and flood control. But these are multi-year, multi-billion shilling endeavors. The question for affected families is, what happens now and what happens before the next rains? The pledge of support must be translated into tangible aid. The process for claiming government assistance is often bureaucratic. Families typically need a national ID, a police abstract report from the incident, and sometimes verification from local chiefs. For those who have lost all their documents in the floods, or for informal settlers without formal land titles, this process can be insurmountable. This creates a risk that the most vulnerable, including the waste-picking community of Dandora, will fall through the cracks of the relief effort. Their contribution to the city's environmental health is immense. Studies suggest the informal recycling sector saves the Nairobi City County government millions of shillings in waste collection and disposal costs annually. Yet, they remain largely unrecognized. Some progressive steps are being discussed. Organizations like the Kenya National Alliance of Street Vendors and Informal Traders are advocating for the formal integration of waste pickers into the county's solid waste management plan. This could mean providing them with identification cards, access to collection points, and even basic health insurance. The Africa Climate Summit held in Nairobi in 2023 highlighted the need for a just transition that includes informal workers. The current disaster presents a tragic opportunity to move from rhetoric to action. As we look ahead, the Kenya Meteorological Department warns that the current long rain season, which typically runs from March to May, is expected to be above average. This means more rain is likely on the way. The 42 lives lost this past weekend must serve as a catalyst for change. The government's response will be judged not only by the efficiency of its 500 million shilling disbursement, but by the structural reforms it undertakes. This includes enforcing laws against building on riparian land, investing in modern drainage infrastructure, and formally recognizing the environmental services provided by informal workers like the waste pickers of Dandora. The floods have revealed a city and a nation at a crossroads. One path leads to repeated cycles of disaster and reaction. The other requires difficult, long-term investments in planning, infrastructure, and social inclusion. The resilience of Kenya's people is being tested. The stories of loss from the 42 families are a somber reminder of the cost of inaction. The determined work of the waste pickers, amidst the toxicity of Dandora, is a testament to the human capacity for perseverance in the face of systemic neglect. As the waters eventually recede, the real work must begin. It is work that demands vision, equity, and a commitment to seeing all Kenyans, especially the most invisible, as essential partners in building a safer, more sustainable future. This has been our deep dive on the Kenya flood crisis. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Kenya News Update today.